Let's get to the key issue here. Last Thursday, the ACT government introduced legislation to compulsorily acquire the hospital. What's going on, Father Tony?
Well, they came out of nowhere. The negotiations stopped in November. So the government had come to Calvary and said, look, you've got extra land there. Is it possible for us to look at a new hospital? And they said in good faith, of course. But then it sort of fell over. And then we hadn't heard from them, or the Calvary hadn't heard from them from November. And then suddenly Rachel Stephen-Smith calls in the head of Calvary on last Monday, and then on Wednesday it's announced they're going to make a compulsory acquisition. So it's come right out of the blue. Back to Katie Gallagher, she said back in 2009, that wouldn't be a good thing to do. That would provide a lot of chaos. So to quote Katie back at her and back at you. So I think that this has come out of the blue, and it's extremely dangerous behaviour by a government which is ignoring really the property rights and the contract rights of a citizen, which is a public citizen in this case.
Yeah, let's get to the fundamental and philosophical issues in a minute. But firstly, let's just thrash out these details. I mean, this legislation has been introduced with enormous haste. Has there been any consultation before the legislation was introduced, or any sort of investigation into the validity of this deal or this legislation?
Well, the health minister's saying, it was a pretty quick decision, but you can't defend that because I think the legislation's either 52 or 58 pages. I read it yesterday. I just forget, but it's a large document. It's very complex. So they introduced that on Wednesday, and then it's this is important for people to know, Fred. They've suspended standing orders, so they will have no discussion about it. They're just going to go straight to the Legislative Assembly. Furthermore, and probably even more disturbing than that, that's disturbing enough. There's a thing called the ACT Land Acquisition Act of 1994. Now, in this legislation, there's a bill they've introduced. They've said, well, look, this won't apply in this case. It will not apply. And what that Land Acquisition Act of 1994 says, that if the government wants to do a compulsory acquisition, which they can do, obviously, under certain circumstances, it must be done on just terms. Now, the government's saying, oh, no, we'll acquire this thing now and then we'll work out the just terms later. Well, that any Australian should be frightened out of his mind or her mind by that sort of behaviour.
Indeed. It sounds like the proposal for The Voice. Vote yes and we'll tell you what you're voting for later. I mean, the church would be mad to agree to this if they don't know what terms it's being conducted on. Now, firstly, Father, we need to, just before we move on, we just need to sort of understand why the ACT government wants its hands on this hospital. What is it up to? Well,
they're saying that they want an integrated service. But ask the New South Wales government if they think St Vincent's is integrated in Sydney, one of the revered institutions in Sydney. This is a nonsense argument. So everyone's asking the question why. Now, we don't really know. Is it because they're going to offer better health services than Calvary? We know in March 2019 an independent review was scathing of the culture of the main Canberra hospital, the Canberra Hospital, of its culture and of its service delivery. So there's no clues there as to why that's the case. Last year, they did a review on abortion services around the city, and the report came out on the 10th of April this year. So then this action came out, and so people are saying, oh, perhaps this is, it's got to do with abortion. But no, because the main Canberra hospital and Calvary Hospital, both of those hospitals do not do abortion, except in case of exceptional circumstances. Yet in that report that came out in April, right at the back end it says, the medical services offered by Calvary have too much of a religious overtone. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean, that St Vincent's in Sydney or the Mater up in Queensland or the Mercy down there in Victoria, no one's ever complained about that. People are delighted to receive the care they're receiving.